All right, the first topic that we'll be going over is about family. Um, I think when people talk about family, sometimes, and I'm not generalizing this, but I think sometimes people are like, "Oh, like I had a great childhood, they're great parents and stuff like that," and then there's the other side where people are like, "Oh, my childhood sucked and my parents were terrible and everything," and I kind of bounced back and forth between those, and I found myself more in the middle now. So I think of parents and those things. It's not as much of a binary, a bit more of a spectrum, I would say. So I would say beginning in like really early childhood, my family was pretty solid. My mom always cared a lot about us and my sister and I, and still to this day, and did literally so much for us. It's unbelievable how she was a homeschool mom and also working as a nurse, like full time during the night. It was amazing. I'm just so blessed that she was able to do that for us and all that amazing stuff. So my dad was definitely more involved earlier on in my life, I would say. Definitely not as much by the time I was in high school. Not really much at all, actually. Um, I never felt like he didn't love me or my sister. I don't think my sister ever felt like that either. But it was more of, may I say, like laissez-faire kind of relationship that my sister and I had with him. So, like I said, I feel like he was very involved earlier on, but then that started to deteriorate as we got older. And I know probably when I was in like elementary school age range, kind of, I think, very hurt by what he would do to us and my mom especially. He, I think, dealt with a lot of these issues that I'm dealing with now about feeling worthy and why certain things happened in his life or they worked out the way they did. And I think he would take that out on us. And it was, I guess, something I thought was very normal, I guess, for people like myself and for families like ours, just to have a dad who was kind of upset a lot and kind of just thought that was normal. And now I'm starting to realize that I think there was significant emotional abuse associated with that. And there are many times that he would break things in our house, and sometimes small things like coasters for like cups and stuff like that. And then other times it was more significant, like taking a hammer to the like bathroom vanity like top. I just remember times where like my mom was just like in tears over things that he said and he did, and it made me feel very bad too. Yeah. I think adding on to like the family, this video is about family, but I think adding on to it, I there was this weird kind of, I don't want to say triad, but the four-person version of a triad. A quad, I guess, would be, but I don't know if a quad has the same connectedness that a triad implies. But anyway, there's like this quad, right, in my immediate family, right? My mom, dad, sister, and I. And I don't think I was like a hard child to raise. I think my parents thought I was very respectful, and I very rarely or ever got grounded. I just didn't really do that. It was much more significant, I feel like, as far as trauma in my life, when it came to like my relationship with my sister, and also the relationships between my dad and my sister, and my mom and my sister. Growing up, like, my sister and I were homeschooled, so we never got any sort of like formal psychological testing in any of the sense, if it was like ADHD testing or behavioral testing, stuff like that. So I think, looking back, I think she had something. I wouldn't. It was mild, I think, for sure, but it was definitely something that could have been treated, I believe. And it was basically like just a kind of extreme anger and behavioral disturbances. I almost felt like it was like a mild form of bipolar disorder, maybe, just from my experience in the clinical setting. That's what it probably was, maybe. Going from, she was very depressed sometimes, crying, and then went to full-on fights with my parents, and that's when it got really scary. And again, when I was little, I always thought that those were just kind of normal. I cannot probably begin to describe all of the fights that we had, or that I observed, I would say, because I usually wasn't always the directly involved. I was more of just a person on the side watching. And I think the fights probably began, in her elementary kind of school age, and then they continued through high school. I think the ones in like late middle school and early high school, probably the worst. And they would go from being just kind of typical fights, involving swearing and just arguing, who could argue over another, who could yell louder, who could, like my sister would try to insult my parents, saying things like my mom was a whore, or, bitch, or things like that. And went from things like that, like fights like that, to more on full-blown physical, like, altercations, I would say. And to the point sometimes where like my sister was like flipping chairs, throwing things in the house at me, at my dad, my sister, or sorry, at my mom. And like there was a time where we had like peas on the stove, and cooking, and my sister just like picked it up and just like threw it on the ground, and they just went everywhere, and there are other times too, my sister would like get like a knife like from the kitchen, and it was either she was threatening myself or my mom or my dad, or she was threatening to like kill herself too. And I think there was many times where my parents were on the verge of calling the police just because it was so hard and dangerous, and like I don't know if they knew what to do either. And other times too where my sister was just so upset and at the point where she was threatening us that my parents were like literally holding her down, and while she was like screaming and all that. And again, it's something that I was so scared like when it was happening, because there were so many times where I did think she was gonna like hurt one of us. But not since I didn't have many people, and I wasn't going to school and hearing about other people and their relationships and families, I kind of just thought it was normal. And since it happened so much, it just kind of became something that was a part of us, a part of our family, a part of her. And it happens, I think, so early on too in my life that I started seeing that it was just like, okay, this is just what people do. She would spit at us, spit at me. I remember having her spit at me multiple times, and whenever she would get mad, or if I was like trying to help in some way, she would often like just grab at me and sometimes dig her nails like into my forearm, or try to slap me. Or I know she would do that to my mom too, slap her a lot, like on the face, or and just like curse her out. I think there's probably more I could add on to this, but I'm probably going to call it here. But something to kind of keep in mind is let me rephrase this. Something to keep in mind as far as the impact of my family on me is that due to, I think, of a lack of socialization, those experiences I thought were normal. And I think something to ponder, I guess, for the listener of this video, whomever it may be, maybe no one will listen to it, but is to think about what it's like trying to win, to achieve success, to succeed academically when you're in your room reading a textbook, maybe let's say like about anatomy, and you hear the screams of your sister fighting with your parents. That was me.